So on behalf of the center, I just wanted to thank Steep for being here, lending her time and her expertise to our center. You can find her normally at Kadampa Center, where she's been a DB teacher for many years. And so I'm grateful, and we're all grateful that she was able to accept our invitation to share her knowledge with all of us today. So thank you so much.
Oh, you're very welcome. I'm happy to share my confusion.
Over to you.
Okay. So I want to just kind of say a couple of things before we do some opening prayers. And so you heard my name. My nickname is Steep. My name is Stephanie Smith. I'm here in Raleigh, North Carolina. I love this topic. So I think we're going to have fun, because that's what we should do. If we're going to learn something, it's got to be, it's got to stick. And usually happiness helps things stick, or terror, but I'm going to go with happiness. I think that'll be a better stick. So why don't we just go around? I'd love to hear your names and tell me, like, it seems like you all know each other. So you go to the center there. This is not your first rodeo. I've already heard that. And something that you're hoping to learn today, or to sit with today, or talk about today. So I don't know if your squares are the same as mine. I can't see your names right now. Okay, Michael, yeah, why don't you start first, and then I'll just call on you, so you know you don't have to over talk each other.
Yeah, my name is Michael. I live in Phoenix, and in fact, the three of us, this is why Barbara said this, we're just in a class with Alan on death and rebirth, Sunday evening or Monday evening class, I forget. But we've just done a lot. We've been doing a lot of this, and I think this is a great way to start. And for me in my own life, I've had the privilege of having both my parents die here in the last few years, and being able to have them in my house as that happens. But then just recently, one of my nephews committed suicide. And so looking at this again for me is something that I want to be prepared for death, but also then be able to console the people around me as they go through that process.
Okay, thank you. And Barbara.
Yeah, my name is Barbara. I live in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. I joined the center, it's approaching 3 years now. I call it my spiritual lifeline. It just has been wonderful for me. And I find that repetition is super helpful for me. So I am looking forward to hearing the information again today. For me, different presenters can make things, I don't know, I can see them in a different way. So even though I've done similar courses to this with Venerable Rabina, and like Michael said, with Alan Malloy, and just other teachers, I'm looking forward to this weekend as well. So thank you, Steve, for teaching us.
Okay, thank you. And Shayla? Did I pronounce that right?
Yes.
Okay.
I'm Shayla. I live in Utah, just outside of Salt Lake City, and death is one of my faves. I'm a retired police officer. I was a death investigator for many years, and I've always been fascinated with death. So, yeah, the process is, well, we're all going to go through it. So I am definitely fascinated and want to be prepared.
Thank you. Thank you. Venerable, is there anything you'd like to say, either about anything?
No, not really. My name is Andrip. I live here in Santa Fe. I'm the spiritual program coordinator for the center. And like people have said, I think it's one of the most important topics because it is something that we will definitely experience. And it's very clear in the teachings that being able to experience it well is incredibly important. And so using the time that we have to prepare is one of the most important jobs that we have. And so that's I don't think that, they say that, if you don't remember death in the morning, then you'll forget to practice in the morning. If you don't remember death in the afternoon, then you'll forget to practice in the afternoon. And, so as people said, constant refreshment is critical. So I'm excited.
Thank you. Yeah, and so I'm, just so you know, as a facilitator or leader, I'm really used to pivoting. And so I didn't know coming into this, sometimes in the DB classes and here in Raleigh, some people this is their very first exposure to Buddhism, is coming into a death and rebirth class. So I was kind of prepared for all angles of this, and will continue to be. So if there's something that we talk about that you all would like a lot more of, then I feel like I can adjust that tomorrow or later today even. If you have questions that I can't help with, I can certainly get, one of us can get some answers for you. So I just want you to know that I have a general direction of where we're going, but it can be altered, and I'm happy to pivot. And I also want this to be real practical. So I think that'll be most helpful. And I think there's some benefits of Zoom. We can do some things on Zoom that we can all meet. That's the benefit of Zoom, from Milwaukee to Phoenix to Raleigh. So let's start with setting our intention. And the way I like to start with intention setting is to just think about some of the things you just said, what you hope to get from this today for yourself personally. Start with that. And do you want, I have the prayers that I sent. I can try to put them on the screen, or if you have them and you want to put them up.
I can do it for you.
Oh, okay, great. So while she's doing that, think about your personal intention. Like if it's, to get more information, to feel calmer, to help others who are dying, to be more prepared, curiosity about this topic. Just sit with your own personal intention a little bit. And then as you meditate on that, because really to meditate means to become really familiar with. And so if you're becoming more and more familiar with your intention, your personal intention, think about the effects that will have first on yourself as you accomplish those goals. As you even just move through the day, the weekend, the next year, your life with that intention, and accomplishing that, how it will affect you and how it will affect those around you. If you're feeling more comfortable with this topic, more assured of your abilities to help those around you, more prepared, how is that going to affect you, your daily life, the people around you, those that you love, those that you don't know, those that you don't like? How is this going to affect them? And in that way, we keep expanding our original intention until it can be the highest intention possible. And with that, we'll say the first prayer, taking refuge and generating bodhicitta. We say it 3 times. And one way you can do this is the first time you say it, think of yourself through all future lives, taking refuge as you cycle through all future lives. And the second time, at taking refuge as you generate bodhicitta. And the third time, taking refuge to achieve complete and great enlightenment. Okay, so we can, Shayla, do you want to read this for us? And we can say it ourselves, but usually on Zoom, you only hear one person. So.
Sure.
Okay.
I take refuge until I'm enlightened in the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By my merits of generosity and so forth, may I become a Buddha to benefit transmigratory beings. I take refuge until I'm enlightened in the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By my merits of generosity and so forth, may I become a Buddha to benefit transmigratory beings. I take refuge until I'm enlightened in the Buddha, the Dharma, and Supreme Assembly. By my merits of generosity and so forth, may I become a Buddha to benefit transmigratory beings.
Thank you. And then if you can scroll down so we can all see the 4 immeasurables. And this is just a powerful poem, prayer. And saying it, I'm going to read it and pause it between stanzas so that You can just let it sink in a little bit. It's a really great way to amplify our intention on trying to, create the best intention for what we're doing. May all sentient beings have happiness and the causes of happiness. May all sentient beings be free from suffering and the causes of suffering. May all sentient beings never be separated from the happiness that knows no suffering. May all sentient beings abide in equanimity, free of attachment and hatred for those held close and distant. Okay, thank you. Yeah, the rest are for later. Thanks. So let's just do a 5-minute meditation just to kind of clear our minds of whatever we were doing before this. If you're sitting in a chair, try to have your feet either, cross-legged or firmly in front of you on the ground. And again, making most sure that your spine is as straight as possible. You can tuck your chin a little bit so that your head, which is actually the top of your spine, isn't bent, and kind of breaking that flow. So tuck your chin a little bit. You can have your hands in the mudra of meditation if you'd like, or on your lap. And your tongue at the back of your teeth kind of helps relax your jaw. Your eyes either closed or a little bit open to let in light and keep you alert. We're just going to do this for 5 minutes. Just taking some deep breaths, bringing all of your concentration and awareness to the sensation of air coming in and out of your nostrils or your abdomen rising and falling, something to tie your mind to. And every time it wanders away, just gently bringing it back the way you would a child that you adore, without judgment, just gently bringing it back to your count. And as you exhale, try to release anything that's on your mind, what you've just done, what you have to do, any physical discomfort, tension, worries. And inhaling as much serenity as possible. And take a few last deep breaths, coming back to our group. Stretching, reorganizing yourself here in our shared Zoom space. Now, it seems to me that you all are, pretty advanced on this topic. But I still, speaking of repetition, I think it wouldn't hurt to remind everyone something a teacher told me early on that is seared into my brain, which is that, and he was saying this before I'm teaching on emptiness, but that all of the teachings are meant to empower us. And so if something frightens us, it makes us pull away or freaks us out, it's usually that we're just not using it correctly. There's something going on for us. That's not the intent of any of this, is to freak us out. Sometimes it meant to kind of wake us up, like some cold water on your face, but you're the one who will know, when do you need that cold water or when do you need a safety net? And we'll get to that a little bit later, that you're the only one who can really decide. What I love about Buddhism and mind training is that there's all these tools. There's no like, hey, you have to use this tool now. No, there's all these tools, and you're the one, hopefully, who will come to know which tool is best to use at which time. So we'll talk about that. But again, all of the teachings are meant to empower us. And so especially when we're talking about this topic, I want us all to keep that in mind and understand, where our fear is. So we are wired, our human brain is wired for fear. It's because it's kept us alive. We hear that stick crack and is it a tiger? Is it what is it? Where our brains are meant to respond to fear. Since we've conquered so many of those kinds of enemies, it sometimes still get, kind of take over, that fear can take over. So understanding our fear, I think, is really, really important. So why don't we go to the chat? What I'd like to do, let's see, is chat enabled? Okay, here we go. All right, so if you can't see it, there should be it should be on the bottom of your screen. You can click on chat and then be able to see it on the side. Is everybody able to do that? Okay, all right. So what I want you to do is just put in chat so everyone can see some of the fears that come to your mind when you hear the word death, when you think about it, because again, if our mind is wired, it's normal to have fear. And the highest fear would be that we lose our life, right? So just what are some things that come through your mind naturally, fearful about death? Does that make sense? What are some of your own fears or thoughts or anything that come up in that area? Then we should be able to see it. And it should say, to everybody, so that everybody could see that. Like, can you see mine? I misspelled it. Yeah, fear, pain, the unknown. Yeah, so these are good. Pain. All right, so Venerable, should I read these out loud for the recording, or people can see it, right?
They won't be able to see it
Okay.
in the recording.
All right, so let me read them out. So the one I wrote and misspelled was the unknown. That I remember as a very young child asking my mom what happens after death. She goes, "Oh, nobody really knows." I'm like, "What? What do you mean?" I was like 4. What do you mean nobody knows? So yeah, she was telling the truth. We don't have anybody coming back and saying this is exactly what's going to happen. So just the unknown, fear, pain, loss of life, loss of family, pain, agony, sadness, the moment at the time of death, you want to take a breath but cannot. So that feeling, you know, of kind of like drowning or suffocating. I wrote uncontrolled bardo. The whole idea of the bardo kind of freaks me out. Long dying process. Not really knowing what to expect. And I don't recall doing this before. Yeah, will I be afraid? Suffering of family and friends. Yeah, these are all really good. I saw this quote that helps put this in perspective, that we think that brave people have no fear, but actually brave people are intimate with fear. So we need to become intimate with our fear instead of like pushing it away, like, oh, no, and having blind faith. We need to have an understanding of what our fear is so that we can apply antidotes, so that we can work with it now. We have this great opportunity to work with our fear now. And for each of us, that fear might be a little different based on what we've seen, based on our own history, based on everything. So it's really important to notice our fear. And that's something we're going to be working with throughout what this whole workshop is about, in my opinion. And so, the benefits of fear is it can motivate us. So it's the whole reason, the fear of death is the whole reason I found Buddhism. When I was a young teenager, I had a horrible experience where I almost died of very violent death. And I tried to put it out of my mind for like the next decade or two. And in my 30s, I couldn't anymore. And I thought, I tried all these things, like, I want to make sure that never happens, that I never die a violent death. By the time I was 30, I realized, there's no guarantee. There's just no guarantee. By that point, I had read Gandhi's autobiography. And what I was so impressed with is that he was practicing multiple times a day, being able to die with the Hindu word for God on his lips at the moment of death. And he was murdered, and he was able to do that. So this one night when I was having all these kind of like bad memories, I remembered him, and I thought, oh, so it's possible to even, die with some kind of awareness like that if you were murdered. So the next day I went to the library. I wasn't raised in any religion, so I really didn't know anything. So I just walked through the religious section, like, let me see what I can learn about dying and something spiritual about dying. And I looked up at the top shelf in the library, and there was the Tibetan Book of Living and Dying by Sogo Rinpoche. And I thought, oh, wow, a book on dying. This is perfect. And so I read that book like a starving person. I just couldn't believe there was this book that actually talked about the dying process and so much more. But it was obviously a game changer, that there were things that you could actually do to prepare. And so I have memorized, my teacher here taught me at the death dissolution stage, and I practice that every day. And it's something that we can and will do, and we can do it multiple times if that's something that interests you. The last group I taught, there was some hesitation about it. So I just want to, we'll check in and see, but it's a good thing to know. And then you can practice it as you see fit. But like His Holiness, practice it multiple times a day. So there's kind of short versions you can do throughout the day just to remind yourself. But there's also a deeper meditation that we can go into as well. So it reassured me. Whereas if somebody maybe just jumping into that meditation, it would frighten them. And that's why I'm emphasize so much that it's really knowing yourself and what tool you need to use when. That's critical. So we'll look at all the different tools, but then you have to decide when to use what. Again, in that last class is when I was asking people like what kind of tools they thought they needed. Well, actually, I'm going to ask you to write this down for yourself now. I want you to write down for yourself. You don't have to share this ever, but you can later if you want. Write down what do you think some of your obstacles are for having a good death, for having the kind of death you'd hope for. What are some obstacles? They could be personal, societal, whatever. I just want you to write a list of what things kind of are obstacles between you and having a good death. So, I mean, it could be some of the things we put up with, the fears, right? Could be fear of those things, but those obstacles. And then also add to that list things that get in the way of you practicing now. Anything for you that you know gets in the way. And if I'm speaking too softly, let me know. Okay, I don't want to. Anything that gets in the way, any obstacle that gets in your way now of practicing. So again, you don't have to share this. This is for you. Because the obstacles that get in the way for your own practice, that's how you're going to know what tools to use. So for example, the last group I was talking to about this topic, it was interesting to me because I was afraid that some people were going to be afraid of this topic, but a couple of people told me their biggest obstacle was the opposite, that they didn't feel a sense of urgency enough. So in other words, for them, it was very helpful to be reminded how close death was. For other people like me, I don't need to be reminded of that because I have really strong memories of that. So it's more, for me, a better tool is to become familiar. Does that make sense? Like somebody is just kind of like sleepwalking and they need that shock. Somebody who's been shocked doesn't need more shock. They need familiarity and comfort. So this is why this part is going to be really important. And I want you to make sure you know which lists you've got so you can add on to them throughout this weekend. Because that way you'll know, well, what do I need? Which one am I feeling now? Or maybe there'll be a new one. Which antidote do I apply now? What do I need to meditate more on today? Okay. All right, last list for now. I want you to write down for yourself, what are the downsides of not recalling death? For you personally, what are the disadvantages of not meditating on, becoming familiar with, thinking about death? These lists probably overlap. That's the whole point. Okay, and then you can add the advantages for yourself personally in your own life of thinking about and meditating on death. So you've got these two extra lists now, the downsides, pros and cons, the downsides of meditating on death for you personally, and the advantages of meditating on death for you in your life personally. You can make it as personal as you can, somebody you know is ill or, whatever it is. So I think, did I say that right? I mean, the disadvantages of not meditating on this, not, just avoiding this topic, and the advantages of meditating on it. Welcome. How are you?
Thank you. Very well, thank you.
Okay.
Nice to be here.
So you know some of these people here?
Yes,
Okay, great.
all of us. It's nice to meet you.
Okay, nice to meet you too. Anna? Either one? Okay. So we were just right. We've been taught, we just got started, and I had people write down for themselves in their own personal list. Sorry about that, guys. Somehow my phone is, I don't really understand this, but somehow, oh my goodness. Hold on a second. Okay, somehow my phone is connected to my computer. So when it rings, my screen just becomes this whole big phone thing, and I have it muted, but I have to, on the break, I'll figure out how to disconnect my phone from the computer. Ugh. All right. So as I was saying, I've had people write down a couple of things. Michael, you want to tell her what one of the lists is?
For me, the issue of preparing for dying is difficult, not because I'm afraid. In fact, what I do for a living, I've been involved in lots of children who have died and adults who have died, both because of old age and sickness, and because of suicide and self-injury and overdose and things like that. But even in settings like that, people just don't want to talk about it. And so it becomes difficult to prepare yourself if you don't have a process to do it on your own, and B, a way of being able to reach out to the people around you. And in fact, one of my goals in learning more about the dying process and meditating on the dying process is so that when it is my time to go, I can help the people around me who are struggling with that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay, that makes sense. So this is why I wanted these lists to be very personal. And so some of the lists I'm asking people to write for themselves on a piece of paper so you can keep it and see how it grows. Some of the obstacles towards having, for yourself, for having a good death, the kind of death that you would imagine, you know, the death that you want to have. What are some of the obstacles to that, personally, societally, physically, whatever it is in your life? What's an obstacle between right now and that possibility? And then for yourself, what are the advantages of meditating and thinking about death? And what are the, for you, and what are the disadvantages or downsides of this? Wasn't there another list I had?
I think, Steve, it was what gets in the way of our practicing and
That's right.
meditating on
Thank you.
death.
Thank you. Yeah, things that get in your way right now. I have, for me, laziness, and my time is so tight. And Michael, I hear what you're saying too. Like even when you're around people, sometimes when we work in really difficult professions, it's kind of this dark humor about stuff, but we never really, and we just kind of normalize things and not talking personally. And Shayla, I don't know if that happened to you as a former police officer. Yeah. Okay. All right. So with those lists, then what I want to do, and Venerable, I think maybe I can share my screen now and bring up this PowerPoint. Okay. So bear with me, guys. Hopefully my phone won't ring again. So open system preferences. All right, are you all seeing a PowerPoint? So while we're trying to figure out some technology, I want you to really now just think about your pros and cons. Anybody want to share any? Pros and cons for you personally of meditating on death? Any downsides of not meditating on death? I'm sorry if I didn't say that before, Anna. Downsides of, the disadvantages of not meditating on this, the advantages of meditating on this. So this is just real, as you probably all know, this is very traditional Tibetan Buddhist meditation, is to meditate, even if it's not on death, even if it's on patience, the benefits of meditating and maintaining patience, the downsides of not meditating and maintaining patience. It's just very traditional kind of way of meditating on this, pros and cons. So similarly, there's a very traditional meditation on the pros and cons, the downsides of not meditating on death and the advantages of meditating on it, because we need to be convinced, before we sit down and do all this, like, why am I going to do this? We're always working with our intention, or we should be. I mean, the thing about intention, it's just key to everything. Even in the West, even in a very non-spiritual sense, if I commit a crime, what the jury is going to be looking at is my intention. It's going to be a really big difference if it was accidental versus intentional. So we understand that intention is everything. Even if it's that I'm going to go to the gym and try to get buff, right? If I lose track of why I'm doing this, I'm not going to do it. So personal trainers are always focusing on our goals and our intentions. It's the same thing, but hopefully with much better results and bigger picture view. Okay. Anything going
I'm
on?
ready, Steve.
Okay, you got the PowerPoint? All right, just go.
Yes, I'm ready to go.
Slide 1 is the prettiest, so let's just go with that right now. Okay, slide 1, that's the last one. So go all the way to the very first one. That's the very last one. Oh my goodness. Okay, there we go. See how pretty that is? I just love it. All right, so now if you just click next, it'll bring up hopefully a slide. Okay, so don't click anything yet. So we're just going to look at these and then we're going to meditate on them, because so these are the traditional. If you click once again, you'll bring up one bullet point. So these are the 6 disadvantages of not meditating on death. There we go. We don't remember Dharma. And so, what is Dharma? We throw the word around a lot. I think there's even characters on TV named these things. It's the Buddha's teachings, but what is it the teachings about? It's the teaching so that we are completely free of suffering forever and ever. That's ultimately what it is about. So we don't remember that there is this path and that it's something that we can actually, that there is a way out of this. If we don't meditate on death, we kind of forget, because we sometimes live in a really beautiful prison. And, prisoners don't have to work on their desire to get out. They don't have to wake up every morning and go, okay, now let me try to remember, I really want to get out of prison. That desire to get out of prison is with them like 24/7. Not us, not so much, for a lot of good reasons. There's a lot of wonderful things about our prison, but we need to remind ourselves oftentimes that it is a prison and that there's a way out. So meditating, if we don't meditate on death, we can forget that. Okay, next. And even when we remember it, even when we remember there's a way out, we sometimes, we don't practice necessarily. We remember there's a path, but we don't get our feet on the path because for lots of different reasons. There's no shame or blame. It's just human nature and the fact that there are some wonderful things here. All right, next. And even if we practice it, our intention sometimes isn't the best. And again, no shame or blame. This is why it's called practice. Because, if I can amp up my intention, my practice is going to be better. Something else that I heard Robert Thurman say. Robert Thurman's one of the, I don't know if any of you know of him, but he kind of founded Tibet House and has some wonderful teachings out there. He came to Raleigh and did some fundraisers for us a couple of times. And he was talking about the topic of death. And he said, whatever you do when you're happy, you do better. By and large, whatever we do when we're happy. So if I have to go to the store for my neighbor and I'm really unhappy about it for whatever reason, I'm not going to do it quite as well as if I do it really happily. If I'm happy, same thing with this class, same thing with getting ready to die. If we do this, if we learn this with joy and happiness and lessen our fear, we're going to do it a lot better. And the key to a good death is cultivating a good life. Why? Because we will approach that with the same attitude that we're approaching everything else in our life, that everything in our life is grist for the mill, is an opportunity to practice. And cultivating, we each individually know the crap that we have to deal with in our life. Each of us knows what we're not good at, where our problems are. Kind of working on softening those edges is what cultivates a good life. And what cultivates a good life cultivates a good death. They go hand in hand. All right, I'm sorry, I went on that little tangent. Next one. And so if we don't meditate on death, even our good practice will become erratic. And the last one, or the next one, we won't make effort to tame our minds, because death is that cold splash of water in the face. I think some of you are of the age where you probably read Carlos Castaneda back in the 60s and 70s. I don't know if yeah. So he has some wonderful things to say about death as well. And so, look at other sources that help you with tame your mind around death. And in one of his books, maybe it was Journey to Ixtlan, it's this whole, I don't know how much of it is documentary and how much of it is fiction, but it's this guy's study with this Mexican shaman. And what the teacher is telling him is to imagine that death is right over his shoulder, literally sitting right there, day in and day out. And that if he looks over his left shoulder, he'll see death. And why? Why is that important? Because you should use death as an advisor. And why should you use death as an advisor? Because it will make every act you do way more powerful. It doesn't mean you don't go to the party, but it means you go to the party and knowing that like death is right around the corner, you're going to treat the people in that party differently. It's kind of a misnomer that if you thought you only had one day to live, you would just like go get high and go do all this crazy stuff. That's what people think. But actually, when they've done some research on groups that have tried that exercise, there's a whole group that tried, like, this is my last year on earth. And they tried to practice that whole year. So they knew they were going to die in a year. They didn't go out and do wild things. They did very meaningful things, very happy things, very loving things. And so using death as our advisor is a way to tame our minds, not with fear as much as with profoundness. There's another quote I read from a book I'm reading currently, and this person was saying, it's our finite lifespan that makes our life meaningful. It's our finite lifespan that makes our life meaningful. If we thought we were going to live forever, and this person and this personality and these circumstances, it would be really different. So it's knowing that, that edge of the cliff is coming. It makes your acts more powerful. So if you kind of bring that up even closer, that's what using death as an advisor is all about. If this is my very last party that I'm ever going to go to, or my last dinner, or my last time I'm washing my clothes. So something to think about. All right, next one. Oops, okay. So now the advantages. Well, I thought there was one more. Okay. There we go. If we don't meditate on death, we will die with worry and regret, because we won't have cultivated the kind of life that we've wanted to cultivate. We'll have things that we regret not saying, not doing. We won't clean up the things that we can clean up now. So there's things that we will be, like in Al-Anon, I think it's the fourth step, is about, coming clean. So if we're using death as a guide, we're probably going to come clean, either just in our own minds or with the people in our lives that we need to come clean with sooner. Because it just puts everything in perspective. And I think it was Venerable Ravina who said, you probably heard her say, if I'm setting off I used to drive to New Orleans, which is where I'm from. Oh my goodness, lots from here. It's about a 15-hour drive. It'd be kind of silly if I was surprised to suddenly see the skyline of New Orleans in my windshield. Why wouldn't I expect to see that? That's where I'm going to. So similarly, we should expect to start to see, death's landscape or skyline and not be shocked by that. And so if we are, then we'll die with a lot of worry that we never thought about this, we didn't do anything to prepare, and so on. All right, now we're gonna go on to the benefits, because that's gonna be a little more fun. All right, the benefits of this is it instills meaning in our life. Just what I was saying about the infinite, where a lifespan was infinite. But because it's finite, it gives us that. And the next one, it interrupts delusions. Death as an advisor definitely interrupts our delusions. It inspires our practice. So remembering in the beginning, it helps us set our intention. So remembering death in the beginning, and then the next one, remembering it in the middle, keeps our focus strong. So sometimes you'll see these really kind of collapse, just benefits in the beginning, benefits in the middle, and then the third one is benefits at the end. And this is why the beginning, the middle, and the end. They help us with our intention throughout any practice. So go to the next one. It helps us dedicate and conclude our practice, whether it's a meditation on death, whether it's anything. You can do this for making breakfast, right? And then the final one is allows us to have a good death. So meditating on death. So these, and I want you to take a look at the ones you wrote down for yourself. Okay, and you can minimize this for now. Thanks, Shayla. Thank you so much for doing that. Okay, so take a look at your own list. And see how did it correspond? Anybody want to share anything? Was it similar? Did any of the things that you wrote down kind of fit under those categories?
I think for me, steep thinking on my feet, with the disadvantages, the first disadvantage that comes to mind is the fear of death approaching, and not understanding the process and just acting out in horror at what's to come, really.
Right. Right. We talked, I don't know if you were here, we talked about how our minds are wired for fear, because it's that fear has kept us alive and protected us. And, we hear danger and we run, which you're supposed to do. So our brains are wired for that. And so fear can help us, but it can also, especially the biggest fear is what we don't know, which is death. And so, there's a couple of things. One is becoming familiar with the stages of dying, which is what we're going to talk about later. And that it's a fact of life, that, we live in a culture and just a time on the planet where there's not very many places to go and talk about it or to practice it or to prepare. And so I personally was incredibly happy when I found books on the stages of death and dying. And then I could see, I remember first it was my dog, watching my dog die, and Geshe-la was with me, and he was like, okay, now you should go inside, because he knew death was getting really close, and he didn't want me to, say or do anything that would interfere with this dog's dying. And then I could see those same things when I helped my mother die. So in that way, Michael, we were talking about how to help others. I felt like I could see, because it took my mother 3 days in the active stages of dying, and I could see them pretty much. I was like, oh, I think this is the first stage. And hospice gets very alarmed by what they call restless arms and legs. And I understand why, because people can actually hurt themselves. They're trying to get up, they're trying to get out of bed. And but I could say, they gave her some morphine during that period, and then we could stop it, because they were no longer going to be distressed by, she was no longer in that stage of restless arms and legs. So knowing those stages really helped me and helped me know what to do for her and what not to do. And in that way, it gave me so familiarity can bring a reduction in that kind of fear. But I think, I've told Geshe-la this, I think the hardest thing is we don't really have like a coming attractions, like you see a movie, you got to watch the trailer, you're like, okay, yeah, I get it. We don't have that. I mean, we can do that with meditation, and we can become more confident in the direction we're going based on our practice or our lives, But just recently, in preparation for this, I used to ask, and I'm talking about Geshe Gelik, who's the resident teacher here in Raleigh. So I asked him in the very beginning when I met him, I would read about the bardo and it would just freak me out. I was like, oh my God, it just sounds like a bad dream. He goes, yeah, all of that description is for people who have not controlled their mind at all. He goes, that's the first thing to remember. So you're reading descriptions of people whose minds are just out of control during the bardo state. And so does that make sense to you all, like what I'm talking about when I talk about the bardo? Okay. So he said, so that's that. Yeah, go ahead.
I was just going to say that I read early on in my study of Buddhism, the Tibetan Book of the Dead.
Mhm.
And that did just that. It scared the bejesus out of me in the bardo. It
Right.
really, really was terrifying.
Right.
Now I understand that that's all just my mind.
Right. Well,
But I guess I just hope to remember when I'm there and all these visions or whatever are coming, that I have the wherewithal to know you're creating all this. This is just your mind.
okay, so we're going to jump right to the heart of what I like to talk about. I wasn't going to do this right away, but this is it. So yeah, that's exactly what scared the hell out of me too. I was like, oh my God, just sounds like you die and you're going, I'm not as afraid of the dying process as I am of that bardo. Sounds like a huge, long nightmare, maybe 49 days worth of a nightmare. Gee, can't wait. And so I just was horrified. So recently when Geshe-la said, again, that's written for people who have no understanding, who are not able to do anything with their minds, but also, so that's why then I memorized the death dissolution states and I meditate on that regularly. But I still wasn't convinced that I would remember this in those states, because how often are you aware that you're dreaming? So the thing that I've started to do is work with dreams, because they are a mini practice for the bardo state. I'll talk about that in a second, but so then Geshe-la told me this other thing that helped. He said, this is years ago when I was again obsessing about the bardo. He said, well, you can practice bodhicitta in the bardo. You can do all kinds of things in the bardo. What you're reading are descriptions of people who can't do any of that, who are just being tossed around like a leaf in a bad dream. So now is the time to practice with our minds. You can certainly use sleep yoga to help you practice, and we'll talk about that because I'm going to give you a little exercise in that. But you can also use your waking daytime. So, oh gosh, like 10 different things I want to say. You can challenge yourself to think throughout the day, is this a dream? If this were a dream, what would I do? What would I do differently? Not externally as much as internally. So you're sitting there, somebody's cut you off in traffic, or there's just a nightmare scenario going on around you. Stop and ask yourself, is this a dream? And if it's a dream, now what would I want to do? Well, there may be nothing I can do because this traffic is horrible and there's this going on and that going on, but I can make sure that I don't get as swept up in it as possible. I can make sure that I try to like kind of wake up and go, oh, right. And be as aware as possible. So it's that kind of awareness that's so important. And we can use our daily waking life constantly as a way of preparing for that, like, wait a minute, this is my mind. We can use our dreams to do the same thing. So when I was younger, I read about lucid dreaming and I got really fascinated with it. And that fascination and that practice with it is the same practice of of using sleep to prepare for the bardo. So I got very good at questioning, like, is this a dream? Is this a dream? And so I would do it sometimes in my dreams, especially if they were a nightmare. I was having a nightmare and I'd say, is this a dream? No, it doesn't feel like a dream. It feels so real, even though, it's lunacy, but I was like, this feels real. And then I remember this one dream. I thought, well, I'm jumping off this balcony, because if it's a dream, I'll start flying. And if it's a nightmare, it can't get any worse, because it was a really horrible nightmare. And I jumped off this balcony, I was flying, and I was like, oh, it's a dream. And I had already been planning, like, if I can wake up in my dream, if I can have a lucid dream, just say a mantra. So I worked on that for like 2 years until I was able to do that in a dream. So that gives me some confidence that maybe I can do that in the bardo state. So what I'm saying is, like, and Bob Thurman talks a lot about this, about using how to have a lucid sleep, how to have a lucid death, how to be aware that you're dying, and all those different things that come up in the death dissolution descriptions that you might have read about, like you feel like your arms are falling, that you feel like you're being crushed, that if you are having a lucid death, you will know that, okay, this is this stage. This is just the mind trying to make sense of what's going on. So the brain is fading away, everything is dissolving, it's trying to make sense, it's trying to make these scenarios, like when you're sleeping and you have a stomach ache and you dream that you're giving birth, right? You're not really giving birth. Your brain is trying to make sense of this pain. That's what happens as we're dying as well. But if we can be aware that, oh, that's what's going on, we're not going to follow that and make things worse. We'll just know this is going to change you to this, to this, to this. Does that make sense? Because for me, having more confidence in the bardo state is the key. I have worries about all the things, but it's the bardo thing that I have the biggest worry about. So there's lots of things that we can do, and we'll talk about that. I just wanted to jump right into that because I think it's key for a lot of people. All right, so that's one of the advantages that's for me about having a good death, is to keep practicing. And you can practice just for now, forget your dreams. You can walk around all day long and go, is this real? The other thing I wanted to throw out there, and then we're going to do a meditation. I'll stop lecturing. But, how do we cultivate a good life? How do we cultivate a good death? One is to not ignore your own personal samsara. The personal crap in your life. I think I'm very guilty of just trying to, like, what they call spiritual bypass, which is bypassing my own crap and just like going above it. And what really changed my thinking about that, does that make sense? What I'm saying? It's a term that's used a lot in the counseling field. I think it was my best alternative. I stopped using drugs, all that. So I was using the spiritual bypass. But then it dawned on me that I think it was definitely through Buddhism. But in the Tankas, how the Buddha is sitting on these discs and on a lotus that's coming out of a mucky swamp, right? So nothing happens without the mucky swamp. You can't just bypass that swamp and find a lotus. The lotus has its roots in all that garbage. That's your own personal samsara. That's your compost pile. Why in the world would you ignore it? It's the very thing that's going to feed your renunciation. And so the word renunciation, I think, in our culture is kind of tricky. I read this great definition by this Zen teacher, and she said, renunciation does not mean going away from the world. It means knowing the world goes away. Renunciation does not mean going away from the world. It means knowing the world goes away. And so if you know that this life goes away, you hold things differently. It helps you with understanding emptiness. It helps you with understanding there's not this solid self. When you go and stay in a hotel room, say you get 2 or 3 nights in a really nice hotel, it's fantastic. You're not you know, typically you're not that surprised when it comes checkout time and you leave. You're not like grieving that hotel room deeply because you never held it that tightly. You knew it was like 3 days in this hotel and it's just fantastic. And you still enjoy it. You still make use of it. Still sit in the jacuzzi, turn on the TV, but you just hold it all differently. So that's the whole idea too of this kind of understanding that the world goes away. And that understanding, that renunciation of the things that cause us suffering comes from our own personal compost pile. So you know that pile, and you know. And so what I started doing for myself then was I stopped ignoring it, and I started to use it, to look at it, to try to process it, because that fueled the things in my life that would help my practice, rather than just pretending I wasn't connected to past difficulties or trauma. So, all right, so that's my little lecture. Let's try to keep my eye on time. Oh, good, we're doing good. Any thoughts, comments y'all want to share before we meditate a little bit? You sure? Okay. All right, we're going to do this little meditation on impermanence. So get into a comfortable position, check your posture, all that good stuff. I'm going to refresh your intention. You know, recalling death in the middle right now is good. You know, that how many people are meditating on death today in this kind of way. It's pretty rare. So the merit that you're creating is unbelievable. All right, so now that you've kind of refreshed your intention, I want you to pick a place that you're pretty familiar with. It could be a house, a building, an office space, piece of land, your home, your birth home, whatever, just a place that you're very familiar with. Give you a minute to pick one. Just pick one. And I want you to go into it as it is now. I want you to walk inside, take a look around at how it exists right now. Look up and down. Notice any smells, sounds. How does it feel inside? Look around at people, things. If it's inside, then take a walk outside. Just get a good feel for how it is right now. Now I want you to go back in time a year or two. Let's go 2 years back, start of the pandemic. Take a look at this same place. What was it like then? Go back in and look around. Notice the people, the sounds. How does it feel? What's the atmosphere like? Now I want you to go back in time about 10 years. So early 2010, 2013, somewhere around there. Take a look at this same place. What does it feel like inside, outside? Who's there? Who's not there? How does it feel to be there. What's going on? And I want you to go back 10 more years, just like 2000, around that time. You can imagine if you weren't there, just go back in that building, that space, that place, and move around inside. Who's there? What does it feel like? What are the sounds, the smells, the people? What's the atmosphere like? Should keep going back in time to when you think this structure was built. Take a look around the area, the land, the people, the feeling, the neighborhood. Now go back in time 100 years. Imagine what was that piece of land like then? Or if the building was there 100 years ago, what did it look like then? Just take it all in. Use your imagination. What did the area feel like? I want you to go back in time as far as you want. Just keep rewinding, looking at that part of the world in time, as far back as you want to go. Okay. And now come forward to the present moment in that space. Kind of dizzying amount of time we're traveling, but in a flash of an eye, you're back into the present in that same space. And now I want you to go forward in a year's time. So next October 2023, you're standing in that same space. Imagine what it looks like. Are there any changes? What would they be? Who's there? Who's not there? What does it feel like? What's going on outside in the area, in the neighborhood? Now fast forward 10 years. So it's 20, 32, 33. And go back into that space. Is it there? If so, what does it look like? Are there any changes to it? Who are the people there? What do they look like, feel like? What's the energy in the place? The traffic. Now go forward as far in time as you want. And look at how this area, this space evolves and changes in any direction you want it to go. It's your creation. Okay, and then come back to the present moment. Take a deep breath. Slowly open your eyes. Okay. I don't know if I can do this, or one of you can do this. Maybe Shayla, you can do this. I want people to go into 2 breakout rooms. So there'll be 2 of you in one room, 3 in. Venerable, if you don't want to go, just let her know. But keep me out of the rooms and create 2 rooms, and you can just put people randomly in there. And you'll have, so before you all go, like 15 minutes just to share what that experience was like, thoughts, fears, exciting things. Just talk a little bit about that experiment in impermanence. And then so since I can't do that, I don't know that I'll be able to tell you when to come back. Let me just see if I can do it. It looks like I can do it. Okay. Assign. Am I considered a co-host? I am? Okay. Assign automatically, include to a host. All right. So I'm going to do this because that way then I can send you all a message like you've got 1 minute left, something like that. Okay. All right. And you can let me know if there's some problem. Okay. Are you all getting anything? No. Okay, great. How come I'm still in this room? Okay.
Hello, Steve.
Yeah.
Hello, sorry, I completely left the meeting by accident.
Okay.
Put me in with Michael.
Okay, let's see. Sign to, that is room number 2.
Right, yes. I joined room number 1.
Okay, so you want to be in number 2, right?
So we make 2, yes, please.
Okay, here you go. All right. Was that too much time, too little time? Just right? Okay. Anything you want to share from those conversations? Like, how did that go? Any things that came up? Did you all pick like homes, or what did you pick as a place?
Go ahead, Ada.
She's calling on you, Anna, right?
Oh, okay.
Oh, sorry. Hello there. Um, so I picked a beachfront. I go sea swimming in the summer, and what was most striking and rather emotional was the people who would not have been there, even maybe the next week, never mind the next year, and how politics and community would change, how people would be thinking different maybe, and as things get more um how can I say, like overtaken by corporations and franchises, and the local cafes and the ice cream parlor mightn't be there.
Yeah.
Um and the fact that we may not have public access to these wonderful places
Mhm.
even. And in as for going back in time, I went back to where, maybe our continental shelves plates are joined together. There was no beach line. It was just, all greenery, and that was rather peaceful, actually. It seemed quite a pleasanter place to be. But again, it was for striking out as the human beings not being there and being there, which was a bit more emotional.
Mm.
And yeah.
Interesting. Yeah. Yeah, it's certainly an exercise in kind of the fluidity of things, right? See how constantly changing something is. Anybody else?
I went just kind of the opposite. Mine was a tree in my childhood back home. And the only change was, it stayed the same, was whether I grew,
Oh,
as a
yeah.
child, the tree was larger, um, and it shrank as I grew. But and as it pretty much stayed the same.
Mhm.
There was a constant.
Interesting. Yeah.
Yeah. And here we are in a class for impermanence.
Right. Right. Once there was this person, after he did this exercise, it bothered him a lot because he's a scholar in Shakespeare, and he was he was just looking at the impermanence of the building he had picked, and was very disturbed. Like, does this mean, that Shakespeare is going to disappear? And I said, well, the thing to think about is it's constantly changing, people's interpretations of Shakespeare. Now you have I can't remember, some actor who had done something kind of unique with it. And so you're looking at kind of the river of Shakespeare, whether it, and the ripple effects it will always have, because things don't completely disappear. They kind of change shape and form and influence things. But you can also, you can, in your mind's eye, you can create all kinds of different outcomes for something, right? So it doesn't have to be moving in one apocalyptic direction.
It did change, as my father had trimmed things, and so yeah.
Yeah. So sometimes when people are looking at the fast forwarding, it looks horrible, climate change and all of this, but it's also still changeable. Something isn't just fixed in this one direction. So I used to, so I'm from New Orleans, as I said, and I'd go home and there was a small Dharma group. We would do this exercise. This is before Hurricane Katrina. And after the hurricane, a lot of people wrote me and said that meditation helped them so much. Just kind of understanding and accepting this radical change to their hometown and their houses, and fixing their houses, and and so with impermanence it can be tricky because it can feel, so oftentimes we're super aware of impermanence on the sad part of it, right, on the difficult part of it. And I had been steeped in the task of caring for my mother, who had to leave New Orleans after Katrina and live with me, and then she had dementia, and it was just this long, slow decline. And I was also going to DC to help my uncle, and it just felt like everything was falling apart. And I remember asking Geshe, what's the antidote to all this kind of sadness and depression around impermanence that I was sitting in and witnessing? And he said, oh, that's easy. you meditate on what's arising. And I hadn't really thought of it that way. I had just thought of, I was sitting on the horrible end of impermanence, and I couldn't see what was arising because I can't see around the corner of where my mother's going to be or any of that. But just remembering that it's not finite. And when I would go, the very last part of her life, she was in this nursing home, and it's pretty grim when you walk in there. But I would start to imagine that all these people who were just kind of in their beds, they were actually in a cocoon. That's what I would start to visualize, that they were like hibernating and being birthed into whatever next life was coming, rather than just what was ending. There was something that was arising. It's just I couldn't see it. And that really helped a lot. That helped a lot. So I just offer that as something that might help you as well as things change. I think that's one of the hard parts, is we don't know what's coming out of that cocoon. So we can get kind of trapped into some difficult thinking around it. So for you all, because you're really different than this group that I was just talking on this topic with. There were several, there was a lot of fear, and so we worked a lot with that. And then I was just talking about rebirth as though everybody was thinking of that, but people weren't. And so I want to know, like, if you have, what your thoughts are on reincarnation, rebirth, questions around that before we kind of move into that topic. You can just say something. You can use words. You can unmute and tell me oh yeah, I have no problem with that, or oh yeah, I really don't believe in that, or I don't know, I'm agnostic. Yeah.
What I will say is I definitely believe in it. And I know that, I don't know specifically what I've done in past lives, and this is a little bit of a challenge for me to know what I did to get me where I am today, because I do have a precious rebirth, and I know that, and I wish I knew the steps. X, Y, and Z is what got me here. So what I am really focused on in my next life is Amitabha's Pure Land, and really aspiring to go there, to expedite, I guess,
Right.
where I'm ultimately going to land.
Right. To get your ticket ready.
Yes.
Okay. Ticket purchased. Yeah. Okay. Well, having that wish is the first thing. So there you go. You have that wish. So that's huge, that you know where you want to go, instead of just oh, this is a big train station. You know which train you want to get on. So that's huge. Anybody else about the topic of rebirth?
I was just going to add one thing. I'm aspiring that, but it's the type of thing that I don't know, other than aspiring, exactly what the steps are to get there. And then I guess my karma is going to come into play.
Right. So, we can talk about it a little bit in the next session or tomorrow about, what is the cause of a perfect human rebirth? What are the causes of being born in a Pure Land? And certainly, familiarity with Amitabha Pure Land, and I'm sure, Venerable can help you with some of these questions in your center of what can you do? How can you kind of pave that path specifically towards that? And how can you plant those seeds? But there are definitely certain things that we've all done in our past life to acquire this opportunity, and generosity being a huge one, right? So and also, looking at your tendencies now are things that didn't just come out of nowhere. So the kind of person you are now, right? It's I remember hearing this one person say, as they were studying astrology, they got the feeling that, oh, this is all part of a bigger picture. And this Buddhist teacher was saying, or you could say it's part of a previous picture. So that, that what your interest in these things, your habits, your generosity, the kind of person you are, the habits that you have came from habits that you've developed. And so now you have a chance to amplify the habits that are good and that set you up to continue that, and to reduce the habits that get in the way. And having a good death, regardless of the circumstances, launch is the launching pad. The mind at the moment of death is the launching pad. And so what we're kind of looking at right now is that kind of continuity. That's why I had you look at the continuity of a building, an ocean, a tree, a thing, the continuity of that. It changed and shifted, but it didn't just come out of nowhere and end suddenly, it shifts and changes. And so you're asking a really good question of how do I direct this continuity of consciousness to go in that direction? And we'll keep talking about that, okay? And so certainly dedicating the merit that you're creating today towards that end. And then there's probably some very specific things you can do for Amitabha Pure Land. And there's people way better qualified than me to answer that very specific question. But we'll talk a little bit more about a precious human life as well. But I'm right there. I want to meet you there, okay? Let's make a plan. That'll also help. Anybody else have any thoughts? Do you have any doubts about, questions about rebirth? Yes, Anna.
Hello. I don't I don't know about questions about, well, maybe some will come up, but I feel extraordinarily excited, really, really quite happy to see what comes next. And the fact I'm, with you guys here today, I'm practicing Dharma, I found, certain teachers, and I think because my view on this life can be, maybe I've had some like negative karma, and I'm just looking forward to next life being, hopefully being a bit, positive karma. But when I look at things ultimately, the fact I'm coming to be on a Dharma path is just, it
Right.
knocks all the negativities, it puts them into place. Heavy stuff as well, but yeah, I think my growing understanding is, it gives me joyful effort in my practice. It genuinely does. I'm so thankful for it.
Yeah, I hear you. It's, our lives are a mixed bag. And I've had some horrible things in that bag, and also incredibly lucky, very lucky. I'm lucky to be alive. I'm like all kinds of things. So yeah, it's kind of keeping that in perspective, that every life is like a handful of, if we have created as much karma as there are grains of sand in all the beaches of the world, right? And so then this life, I sometimes like to think of it like this, like it's a scoop full of that sand, and it's going to have a mixture of everything. So there's a prayer I say every day where I'm basically confessing all these horrible things that I didn't do in this life. I have no memory of any of those things, right? But it's just the assumption that we've all committed them. And so with this scoopful of sand in our hands, it's going to be a mixed bag. And fortunately, though, I have my faculties and this path and people to help me clean up the crap that's in that handful and use it. And so this is one of the things, this is why I was talking about you using your own personal samsara, as a compost pile to launch you in the right direction. And Lama Yeshe, I believe it was, who had said that, the juicier the samsara that you've had before you get on the path, the juicier your path will be. So it's not like, oh, you need this really perfect life and then you get on here and you don't need to be like an A student from the best school to graduate top of this class. In fact, quite the opposite. So if you had straight A's from kindergarten, you might lack the motivation. But if you were homeless and then you got into Harvard, which there have been some people, they take the whole scene very differently. So if you can, Shayla, bring up my PowerPoint. We're going to take a break in a minute, and I want to kind of wrap up this continuity of consciousness thing, because it's only natural that at times we're going to like, wait a minute, what's going on with this rebirth thing? I don't remember anything before this. I remember when I was really little, I tried to remember like what it was like before I was born. I could go back, I was like 4 or 5 trying to do this. And it just got dark. That's all I could remember. I was so disappointed. I was like, I want to remember something. And so, this there are people who study reincarnation. I mean, scientists who, there's a lot of people, what I'm trying to say is a lot of people will say, even our own minds will say at times, wait a minute, there's no proof of reincarnation. Well, actually, there's probably more proof of it than there's proof against it. There's more people who can recount and have no reason to like make it up, like a little kid in a family who doesn't believe in reincarnation, who's kind of freaked out by the whole idea. A child who's actually recalling events. And there's people now who collect all of these from all around the world. So there's actually a little more evidence of reincarnation than there is to dispel it. And then also we can look at physics to help us kind of, if we're having any kind of doubts or shakiness about it. Shayla, were you able to pull it up? Okay, great. So go to the slide where those buildings. So this is just something when I was trying to like, I think when I was in one of my DB tests or something, I had to come up with like how I could prove reincarnation or something like that. And the analogy I came up with, because I love metaphors, was, okay, if you're sitting in this, say we're in an apartment and this is our view, and we're never able to leave this apartment, and the apartment is kind of like our life. And we look out and we see that water. I think this is actually in New York, and that's either the Hudson or the East River. But we might think, oh, there's a lake over there. Cool, there's a lake. And then if we look a little closer, as we get older, we might want to challenge our view if that's a landlocked lake. We might see the water is always moving in one direction. We go, oh, that's weird. How come the water's moving? And then we might notice that there's a boat that comes in from one direction and leaves in the other direction. And so we might start to challenge whether or not this is a lake. And if we got above it, if we were not just sitting in this little apartment box, but we got up on the top of the building, or we took a balloon ride, we would see that, whoa, this is a river. And I can't actually even find the beginning of this river. I can't find the end of this river. It just flows into all the water on the earth. And it joins all of this, and all of this is spinning around. And that's how I kind of, whenever I have any shakiness in continuity of consciousness, I kind of come to this. So can you go to the next slide? And then also remembering, what is the nature of mind? So if you've been in Discovering Buddhism classes, you've probably taken tests on this or something. So if you just click, it should go to the next slide. And so just remembering, that the mind is clear and knowing. That's the nature of the mind, that it's clear and knowing. It doesn't mean that your personality knows everything, but the nature of mind with a capital N is clear and knowing, that it's a beginningless continuity of awareness. Okay, so in the Tibetan language, clarity, the clear knowing, actually translates into something that gives rise to. This is where you get dependent arising. So the mind itself, which is what, when the mind separates from this body, in what we're talking about, that's the moment of death. It's not when your heart stops or your breathing stops. It's when the mind separates from this vehicle we're using and travels onward. So the clear knowing doesn't stop. It gives rise to something else. And that's why it's so important to be focusing on our state of mind. Because our mind has not stopped. It didn't begin at a certain moment. Certainly this being that I am had a moment of beginning and a moment of ending. But one thing leads to another. One moment leads to another. Every thought that we have arises out of something else. The fact that you're taking a note and writing that down, you can bring that all the way back to the very first moment you were taught to write, that you heard words, right? There's no starting of that. And so then here you are now writing down something. So there's all these streams. That's what I'm trying to get at, all these streams. And so now Barbara knows where she wants her stream to go. And so now she can start kind of shaping that river. Just like if I put green dye in the river on St. Patrick's Day, the next downstream is going to be green. Upstream, not so much. If I pollute the river, that's what's going to happen. If I clean up the river, that's what's going to happen. So there's things that we can do with this continuity that we are doing with this right now to affect the flow. So on that note, why don't you stop sharing and we will take a break for lunch. And so it's 2 o'clock. Well, it's 12 o'clock for you all. And I'm fine if you, I mean, we're scheduled to come back in 2 hours, right? Venerable?
An hour and a half now, 90 minutes.
Okay, so that would be 1:30. Is that good with you all? Do you want to come back earlier? 1.5 hours?
I don't mind coming back earlier, just because I'm a bit forward in time in the UK here.
Oh, you're in the UK. Oh my God.
But it's half an hour. I'm easy.
Yeah. What do people think about coming back in 1 hour? It's fine with me. Okay. All right. Does that work, Venerable? Okay. So, all right. So we'll come back at 1 hour and talk about, relativity and everything. What time is that there for you then, Anna?
So it will be 8 o'clock p.m. in 1 hour. So
Okay.
not bad.
Not bad. All right. It'll be 3 o'clock my time. And who's in Milwaukee? You're in Milwaukee? 2 o'clock. All right. Love it. Love it. Okay. See you all in an hour. And so do we just get off of this link and then use the link again, or what do we do? Yeah. Okay.
I'm just going
We
to
can
turn my
stay.
Okay.
You can just turn your camera off. We can stay on, or you can pop back in. It depends on you.
Okay. I'm probably just gonna stop my video and probably, I guess, yeah, we'll stop recording this, right? And so, just do a little kind of a 1-minute dedication in your mind that, that for all this time that you have spent this morning thinking and talking and sharing, and, you're also sharing with the people who may watch this video. Every comment that you've made is helpful to them. And so, again, kind of, this is remembering death at the end, dedicating the merit towards you're achieving all the goals that you've written down and how they're going to affect you and all the beings around you from here and into the future. Okay, and here's your homework for lunch. Sorry. Your homework for lunch is, as often as you can, okay, let's make it like this. Try every time you open a door, refrigerator door, a cabinet, the bathroom door, your car door, see if you can remember to stop and question, is this a dream? Is this a dream? Am I awake? Or what would I do if this were a dream? So you're just going to stop and kind of question reality. Okay? And we'll talk about why later, but as often as you can, and then see, maybe you won't remember. I've done whole days where I couldn't remember it, but let's see if you can remember to stop and question, is this a dream? Look around and check and see if it is. Okay. I'll see y'all in an hour. All right. Welcome back. Did anybody remember? So? Yeah, anybody else? Remember to, like, when you opened a door or a drawer or a cabinet, to stop and question. So it's hard.
I forgot. I'm so sorry. I really
That's
did.
that
Just
that
got on with what I was doing, and then made something to eat, and I was planning to, as I was filling my face with ice cream, to imagine that was imaginary, but I just forgot completely.
it's very, very easy, which is why the whole point of the exercise, just like when you first meditate, and the whole point is to talk about how hard it is to let the mind's all over the place when people first try to meditate. Same thing with this, to try to recall, and question. it helps me to see how hard it is now when everything is super duper easy and comfortable, how hard it will, challenging it will be in the bardo. And in my dreams, it's very hard because everything seems really real. Even when I stop in a dream and go, is this real? It feels so real. And the point of just stopping and questioning it is it will give us that habit of questioning it in the bardo. So we won't just get, because I think one of the things we're talking about is the fear of that bardo state where we might just get kind of swirled around in whatever mind state we're in. So we can practice that now. And so, I mean, I was really young, as a younger person, really keen on lucid dreams. So I used to every day have a different prompt where I would stop and question myself, whether it was, okay, every time I see a dog, I'm going to ask myself, and I'd forget all day long. I'd see millions of dogs. I would never question. Okay, every time I open a door. And then I would make little marks on my hand so that anytime I saw that mark, I would stop. That worked better. It's just a way to start questioning reality. And also, I mean, you can do it for other things. Every time I see a dog, I'm going to stop and question the solidity of the I that I'm identifying with, the nature of I. Something so that it will make actually that process of letting go into the next experience easier. We can practice with all kinds of things. Falling asleep, none of us are afraid to fall asleep. I mean, well, maybe we are, but generally speaking, we're not afraid to let go of consciousness. Some people say, oh, I'm sure there's nothing after death. It's just dark. It's just black. It's nothing. It's nothingness. But we don't feel that when we're going to sleep. Our consciousness is shifting, and actually it's going through a very similar process of the death dissolution states, which we're going to talk about in a minute. But we're not afraid of that. Also, because we wake up the next morning, we have experience. We don't remember the last time we died, typically. We don't remember going through those dissolution states. We don't remember the bardo. But, obviously it didn't destroy us. We're here. So we can use things to practice that letting go. And, the dissolution states it's really a dissolving into the next state. It's a dissolving, but our consciousness moves, the subtlest consciousness moves. During lunch, I was also thinking about how I had read that St. Francis, he called everything brother and sister, like sister water, and he called death brother death. And I thought that's a really nice way of trying to, so there goes my phone again, hold on. It's actually Geshe calling me, but I'll have to remind him what I'm doing. So it's what was I saying? Oh yeah, so brother death is a really nice way of taking some of the fear and the sting out of us. It's not trying to harm us. Death is not trying to. We imbue all these kind of negative things onto it. So I think brother death is a really nice way of changing that. The other thing that I think that we can do with some of the fear, because that's kind of the common thing that we're talking about, is practice self-compassion. I remember Geshe had told me that one of my biggest problems is that I don't include me in all of the prayers, the four immeasurables, all the things, may all beings have happiness. He goes, you're forgetting, you're not even thinking of you when you do that. You're like putting yourself out there, and that's different. He goes, that's very different than holding beings as more precious than you. You're not even including yourself as a precious being, and that's a huge mistake. And it's taken me a long time to get that. And I see a lot of us sometimes have this misconception of, oh yes, they're precious, but I'm not. That's not the same as destroying self-cherishing. I mean, sometimes I think the word cherishing is a little tricky for us, so I just change it to selfishness in my mind, or self-grasping in my mind, and that cherish everybody, including yourself, including this life that you have. And so that's why if you've done Tonglen, I mean, I feel like I'm talking to people who are pretty advanced here. So you start with yourself. Just remember to do it that way. Then that becomes more of a habit of self-compassion, self-care. And so when you are meditating on death, or as you're getting closer to death, or as you're taking care of somebody who's dying, start with, taking care of your own fear and being as compassionate and gentle to your own fear. Don't try to make it just disappear. So I know, Anna, we were talking about how fearful we might be at the time of death. And I've really struggled with that a lot in my life. And so not trying to make it just go away, but to try to be as compassionate to that part of me that's fearful. It's not 100% of me. Is there's a part of me that's fearful, and can I treat that part the same way I would a child that I care about? You know, it's not, it doesn't have to take over. It will take over if I just deny it a voice. But if I am patient with it and loving towards it, it will probably feel a lot more comforted and let me, the wiser part of me, move on. Anything that came up at lunch that you want to share or ask or put on the table? Yeah.
For me, the one thing that came up for lunch that, you know, when we were writing our things down that I didn't really look at, when we first got on, I was thinking more about, okay, at that time when I go through my own dying process, what do I need to think about? But more often than not, and where I really want help is, how do I use that process to make today better? When I'm not dying, when I'm not dealing with somebody with death, right? I mean, I am kind of figuratively, because we are all impermanent and there's all the things, but I'm not going to die. I'm it's highly statistically improbable that I'm not going to wake up tomorrow morning, right?
Right.
So how do I use that to motivate me to move my life in a positive direction today?
And how do you use what in particular? This whole topic?
Yeah, how do I use the whole topic of death and dying and meditating on the stages of death and all of those things? Because for me, I don't want to just say, hey, what I'm going to do is set myself up so that in the next life, or 3 lives from now, or 3 eons from now, or 23 eons from now, I'm going to finally reach Buddhahood. I want to say, what can I do today to move myself closer? And so how do I use the stages of death, meditating on the stages of death, meditating on death and dying, meditating on the process we go through the bardo? How do I use that to move me today closer to enlightenment?
Okay. Yeah, I think like we're going to go through the stages of death a little bit today and then more tomorrow. You can use them every single day to become familiar with them so that they are second nature. You can use them, you know, Geshe-la told me to use them as I fall asleep. And I said, yeah, but sometimes I fall asleep in the middle of reciting them. And he goes, that's okay. That's fine. That's okay, because you're getting used to this process of kind of, as you're dissolving into sleep, being aware of those stages. So if I'm hearing you right, your question is, how do you use today when you're not in the death process or nobody around you is dying? How can you use this great opportunity we have to prepare yourself for death? Is that right? Or are you saying, how do you?
Yes, but more than that, how do I use it to prepare myself for enlightenment?
Oh, well, okay. So moving from life to life, one of the things that really stood out to me when I was doing all this exploring of death is that the moment of death is this incredible launching pad towards a better life, towards the ability to what they call merge the child light with the mother light. You know, that's your awareness of emptiness with emptiness itself. So death is this super powerful launching pad. And so we can use our practice in this life so that we can take advantage of that launching pad. And that would mean becoming more deeply aware of what emptiness is, increasing our child light, and increasing our understanding of the death dissolution state so that we can use that as this incredible ability. So yes, every single thing we're doing all day long is going to help us reach enlightenment, because we need to create the causes and conditions for enlightenment. It's not just going to fall. And we're not, like His Holiness has said, we're not rolling down a hill towards it. It's not like it's inevitable we're going to reach enlightenment. It's inevitable that consciousness continues, but we have to direct it. And so that's why I was a little confused by your question, because yeah, who knows how many eons or minutes it will be until one of us reaches enlightenment. But every single thing we're doing is kind of adding a drop in that bucket or not. And so, just attending and thinking about this is putting a lot of drops in that bucket. So every single thing we're doing can add up to that tipping point. And there's lots of modules in DB that are talking about that in particular. This one, because it's talking about death and rebirth, is how do you set the continuity of consciousness up so that it can continue on to create the causes and conditions for enlightenment. And what happens during the death process is definitely, it's like supercharged chance. Now, not preparing for it, then that opportunity that happens at the moment of death will be as rare as seeing a star in the daytime. That's what I've heard people say. So I used to think, okay, when any being dies, then there's that the light appears. And so every living being will have that opportunity to become enlightened through the death process. And Geshe-la was like, no, that's not true, because you have to have practiced that ability of seeing, otherwise it'll just go right by. So we're going to watch a video in a minute that I think might get to that a little bit. And tomorrow I'm also going to hopefully play this 30-minute, maybe it's not 30 minutes, but it's around there, of Bob Thurman kind of walking us through the death dissolution states. So when I talked in the beginning about kind of pivoting, and that's what I want to do, is I think you all want to hear much more about the death dissolution states. We need to still weave in these other things, but we can do more of that if that's of interest to everybody. So we can kind of introduce that a little bit this afternoon, and then tomorrow kind of go into it more. The other meditations that we're doing are it's the water on the face, like, wait a minute, why am I doing this? Oh yeah, right, because death is right around the corner. I see it, just like I see the skyline. I better do more. I can't just wing it. But of course, everything we're doing, any kind of way that we are cultivating a good life, cultivating happiness in our life, and that is also going to create a good and happy death, because we will have the habit of turning difficulties into opportunities, right? And I know, Michael, you'd also talked about how do you prepare those around you not to be kind of clinging and holding on to you. It's a tough thing. You can, depending on your relationship, you can try to talk with people now, depending on their faith, what helps them understand. I know for a lot of people, it's helped them to watch videos when people describe near-death experiences. It's helped them not be so fearful of their loved one dying. So whatever kind of helps them and helps them understand that you're okay with it, that they can miss you, but trying to do X, Y, or Z might not help you. I remember reading this book after Joan Didion, who's this writer, her husband died suddenly right there at the dinner table. And so her book, The Year of Magical Thinking, I think it was really interesting. But it was all about her grief. And there was like one sentence in there where she said it dawned on her, he's already dead, it dawned on her that he might need her help, but she had no clue about what to do. So she just kept on going. And she was just writing about her own shock at his loss. But I thought, if we can hold both things, yes, here's my loss, but maybe there's something I can do for this person who's no longer here. But she just had nothing to do. There was nothing she could do. But you can tell people, here's what I want you to do for me. This will help me. This is what I believe you can do that will help me after I've died. And sometimes having something to do is a very powerful thing for other people who are left behind. So if you're trying to prepare them, that's one way. Okay, so all right. So I think playing this clip will help us, and then we'll do this little this meditation ourselves of going through the death dissolution states. So Shayla is going to try.
Venerable, I just realized I'm on my laptop and I don't have the interface for Zoom. I put it in chat. Can you try?
Sure, I just need co-host controls.
Oh. Oh, never mind. Michael has it.
And I might be able to play that myself, but if you can.
Here goes.
All right, so we should be coming in at minute 5. is this, yeah, 5, if you can bring up to 5:30. And let me just explain a little bit. So you all can watch the whole thing on YouTube, obviously. And how many of you have seen this? Okay, good. So Leonard Cohen is narrating, and it's the story of this monk and this little monk who are going to go and help this family. So we're coming in right when he's starting to talk about what they're going to do to help this family whose adult son is dying kind of prematurely. So if you can start it at 5:30, and we'll stop at 16:12. And if you can't hear it, because sometimes you have to do this thing of like, there's some button to make it better for sound.
One day, while Tupton Sering is preparing the morning meal, his teacher tells him, "A man in the next village is dying. We will leave here early tomorrow so that we can help him. We will be going there every day for the next 7 weeks. We will read the Bardo Total to him." Then he sends Tupton to the monastery library to find the Bardo Total. Known in the West as the Tibetan Book of the Dead, this text is a guide for those who are dying and is used in all Buddhist countries of the Himalayas. It was written in the 8th century by Padmasambhava, who brought Buddhism to this region, and it has been an integral part of people's lives here ever since. The Bardo Total will be read aloud to the dead person for 49 days, which is the usual length of time between death and rebirth. This is the first time that Tupton has been asked to assist his teacher. What happens when we die? At death, we lose everything we thought was real. Unless we can let go of all the things we cherished in our life, we are terrified. If we cannot stop struggling to hold on to our old life, all our fear and yearning will drag us into yet another painful reality. But where does the consciousness actually go? We are always wandering through transitional states called bardos. The name of this text means the great liberation through hearing in the bardo, and it describes the transitions from death to life. As we read the text aloud to guide the dying man, what happens will become clear to you. The Sonams live at the edge of a nearby village. The family is very religious, and Grandfather Sonam is often at the temple. But it is his second son, Sering Sonam, who is dying. He has been somehow stricken while traveling on business, in spite of the fact that he is only 42. It will be hard for him to let go of his attachment to this world. To leave his wife and his old father must be very difficult, and this can cause him to wander in the painful uncertainty of the bardo for all of the 49 days after his death. Thank you for coming to us. Are you well, old man? I'm all right, but my son, The Lama will do all he can for the dying man and also for his family, who themselves must be grief-stricken at the suddenness with which they face the loss of beloved son, husband, and kinsman. The bardo of dying lasts from the beginning of the body's physical collapse until the body and consciousness separate. While we are living, the elements of earth, water, fire, and air together support and condition our consciousness and our perceptions. Death occurs when this is no longer the case. Now, without the screens and filters of daily life, at this time, mind itself can be seen directly. We will now begin to read the Bardo Total. Don't cry, it doesn't help, it just confuses the dying man. The most important thing now is to help Tsereng Sonam's mind be untroubled and clear. First, move him onto his right side. Then, as in this statue, he will be lying in the same way the Buddha did at his own death. In this position, it will be easier for his life force to become peaceful. According to the Book of the Dead, dying people are sensitive to sound both as they die and for certain periods after their death. Thus he will hear the teachings which can help him. Tsereng Sonam, we are here to help you. Tsereng Sonam, listen to me carefully. Listen, Tsereng Sonam. Now is the time for you to pay close attention. Do not be afraid. You are dying, and the four great elements of your body are collapsing one into the other. It feels as if you are being crushed by mountains, tossed by waves, scorched and carried off by a strong wind. This is the bardo of dying. It is important now to recognize your own nature. Do not resist this. Do not be afraid. O son of noble family, the time of death has arrived. Now let your compassion be limitless as space. Let your mind be at peace. Rest in this, the vast, empty luminosity of mind itself. The Tibetan Book of the Dead describes the collapse of the body's constituent elements. Earth collapses into water, water collapses into fire, fire collapses into air, and air dissolves into consciousness. Then there is an experience of piercing luminosity, pure white light, the clear radiance that arises from the direct experience of one's own basic nature. Now there is no darkness, no separation, no direction and no shape, only brilliant light. This boundless, sparkling radiance is mind, free from the shadows of birth and death, free from boundaries of any kind. Sereng Sonam, listen. Now all pervasive light engulfs you completely. All of space is dissolved into pure light. This radiance is the mind of all the Buddhas, all the awakened ones. To recognize this is all that is necessary. Teacher, what happens to him if he doesn't recognize his own nature? Well, there were definite indications that he did not recognize it, so it is as if he has fallen into a dreamless sleep. Can he still hear? No, but in 3 days' time, his consciousness will hear more clearly than ever before. All his senses, all his emotions will be vivid and intense, and although it will seem to him that he has entered some new reality, it is still just the reality of his own mind.
Okay, let's pause here, Anne. Thank you. Thank you. Later, we can play part of another part of it. And like I said, tomorrow we'll play something that'll walk us through the whole death dissolution stages again. So you heard, well, there's like 10 different things I want to say. One is I sent Venerable Losang the free booklet that Lama Zopa Rinpoche put together for DB students, and I think, can you send them? I emailed it to you at lunch. He can send that to you all. It has in there practices for how to get to the Amitabha Pure Land, Barbara, and just it encompasses so much. It's a wonderful booklet. And you have it? Is that the same one? I'm not sure if it's the same one, but anyway, yeah, they're all good. And this one, it may be. This one is something you can print out. It has how to help other people, how to help your family members. So before, I just wanted to make sure I mentioned that. And again, it addresses some of the direct questions you've asked about death and Amitabha, and why Amitabha Pure Land is such a great place to go. And actually accessible even if you haven't reached some of these other states. But we can use, one of the things I think, Michael, to get to your question is, everything can be used to help us reach enlightenment. And since death is such a powerful launching pad, we can use our daily life and all the changes that we go through in our daily life to prepare us for that. So when we die, it's all, as you just heard, it's all of our aggregates that are dissolving, right? And the thing about that we understand is that everything that comes together goes apart. This is impermanence. So everything that comes together goes apart and then comes together and then goes apart. And so this class, we're all these different aggregates that have come together, and then we're going to stop for today and we'll go apart and then we'll come back together. It's only when we're together can you put the label of discovering Buddhism on this. Otherwise, if we all weren't here, it wouldn't really be able to hold that label. So throughout the day, practicing with that coming together and going apart, we're constantly entering Bardo states. We're constantly entering them, and they're not as scary, but we're constantly entering them, and we can practice with that. How can when you have young children, you can see that their transition from home to school to home is always a big, chaotic deal. And then we still have that in us. So how can we practice our transitions with mindfulness? How can we be aware that, oh, this is what's happening? Am I awake or am I dreaming? And that even if we don't, so I used to be very obsessed early on with like, oh my God, I have to get enlightened like tomorrow. And then I heard His Holiness say something in this teaching that was just amazing. It hit me really like a ton of bricks at that point, because he said, once you reach a certain level of awareness and a certain level of bodhicitta, you just go from happiness to happiness. Even if you're not fully enlightened yet, you're on your way and you go from happiness to happiness. You're not going down anymore. And it's just knowing that even just blew my mind. Like, okay, at that state, and coming from a Western perspective, I can, I've heard more stories about, like, say, St. Francis. So say St. Francis had achieved the level of a bodhisattva. And that's what he was doing, was going from happiness to happiness. I can picture that. That's something that's easy for me to picture, easier to picture. And I can get there. And so in this life, if we are practicing the 6 perfections, if we're working with the 5 powers, which we'll talk about later, we're getting there. You know, we're moving in that direction, and that we can take some confidence in that. So I want to first read through the death dissolution state before we do a meditation on it, because, you know, this collection that I can label as me is made up of these aggregates that we're going to talk about that are dissolving during the death dissolution state. It's also elements, right? It's the earth element. You heard him talk about the earth element collapsing into this. And these elements that are collapsing have different signs, physical signs that you can witness from the outside if you're watching someone die. And then there's inner signs that the person who's dying will experience. And so I would encourage, like when I lead like an 8-week class, I really want people to be able to memorize those stages by the end. And even you can just memorize the inner signs, then you can do a kind of a quick memorization of it. I mean, quick running through of it during the day. And that's what Bob Thurman calls, what did he call, like an 8-note scale, so that you can run forward and backward on that scale throughout the day. The longer meditation, you need more time. But so there's the first stage is when the aggregate of form dissolves. And that's when your body becomes thinner and your limbs become loose. You might have seen that with people. And some of these stages, you know, I remember asking Geshe, like, wait a minute, I've seen some of these stages take years. And he goes, yeah, you know, as people age, you see some of these things. Then at the moment of death, they're much more sped up. If somebody dies a fast death, then these are all happening like in the blink of an eye, right? But if somebody like my mother, who took years, I mean, she was slowly deteriorating, and then she was in the active stages of death for like 3 or 4 days. Once Geshe told me, once she entered those stages, there's no turning around. That's really, and yeah, hospice was basically saying the same thing. People thought she was about to enter that many times, and she didn't. But she's like right on the doorstep, and then she pulled back. Once she's in those stages, there's no real turning around. So there's just as a reminder, there's the aggregate of form, our body, aggregate of feeling, pain, pleasure, all of that stuff. And there's the aggregate of discrimination. This allows us to discern between different things, people's names, you know, this is that. The aggregate of compounding aggregates. So when that dissolves, that's kind of your awareness of worldly activities. And we'll talk about how that dissolves. That's much more subtler than what we're going to talk about in the beginning. And then the aggregate of consciousness. And so then there's, you know, different levels. There's of consciousness, subtle consciousness, and very subtle consciousness. Then there's also all the elements that are dissolving. So I'm going to read through before we meditate, just so you can ask me any questions before we meditate. So the aggregate of form dissolves, and that's when your body becomes thinner and your limbs become loose and unmanageable. And the inner sign will be like a mirror. They call it a mirror-like. Wait a minute, I'm sorry. So a mirror-like wisdom dissolves. These and the 4 other wisdoms are labeled according to the function of the senses. So your ability to see many objects at the same time dissolves. You cannot see the forms and very clearly. You can still see, but you can't see forms. Your vision becomes blurry. The earth element dissolves, and it feels as though you're sinking. Sometimes this is one in the early stages of dying, sometimes disturbing to people. Even my dog just kept trying to get up. You'll see people kind of reaching and trying to get up because they'll feel as though they're falling. And one of the things that's happening is, as the brain organ is dying, it's trying to make sense still of what's going on. And so it's imputing these things. Just like I have really bad tinnitus in one ear. And what somebody explained to me is that it's actually there's some hearing loss, and the brain is trying to make sound. So it's not actually anything other than the brain and neurons and all these things. Same when you're dying. Then the eye sense base dissolves, and you can no longer open or close your eyes. And then the inner The inner subtle form dissolves and your body kind of loses its radiance. So this is all the first stage. And the inner vision, which is one that you should memorize then, is you'll have a mirage-like image. It could be different depending on what your brain does with what's appearing, but it's kind of a blurry, mirage-like, because of what I've just described about these other things dissolving. So it's watery, things appear like at a distance, very mirage-like. So now that means that's that first stage, which could take a second or a day, 2 days. The next stage, the aggregate of feeling starts to dissolve, and you can no longer experience pain, pleasure, or neutrality. You can no longer care about them. You no longer experience them. You no longer remember them. Those are gone. Then the wisdom of equanimity dissolves, which and the water element dissolves. So the liquids in your body dry up, your mouth and nose feel dry. This is a sign that death could be within 1 or 2 hours. You'll often see this is when you're swabbing people's mouths. If you're doing some kind of care for someone who's dying. The ear sense base dissolves, and can no longer hear sounds. And in the meditation, it's like outer sounds or inner sounds. And I remember asking, what are inner sounds? And if you just put your fingers in your ear, you hear your own inner kind of thrumming. So that sound is gone. So, and then the inner vision is smoke. So mirage is gone and smoke appears, or sometimes it might be called fog, but it's just kind of this swirling cloudiness. Okay, so then the next one is the aggregate of discrimination dissolves, and you can no longer recognize your friends or relatives. You can no longer, it can come in stages, like you no longer remember their names, then you no longer remember your relationship to them. But of course, you're not, if that really bothers you when we do that meditation, just keep in mind that this is also a stage, and that your connection with them, your relationship to important people in your life doesn't end. Nobody's getting out of this dead, as Robert Thurman likes to say. So you will be around them again. And then as the fire element dissolves, the body's heat ceases, and so does the ability to digest food ceases, and so that whole warmth withdraws. The nose sense base dissolves, breathing becomes difficult. Usually what you'll see or experience or witness is like a short inhale and a very long exhale. And that's kind of jagged. And, my mother was in that stage for a long time. So there'd be like an inhale, and then it would take like 2 minutes of this long exhale, and then another inhale. The inner sense of smell dissolves, which is one of the last senses to go. And then the inner sign is fireflies. So like sparks of light or fireflies. And then you know that death is very close. This is also when people are talking about whether if the feet are cold, that's pretty good sign. The heat is coming up. The consciousness is going to leave to the top of the head. This is why we're taught, not to touch the body, to leave that alone. And after my mother died, Geshe-la had me bring a statue and put it on the top of her head, just for a moment, and pull a hair at the top of her head to help consciousness leave through the top. So now the aggregate of compounding aggregates dissolves, and you can no longer move your body. Your awareness of worldly concerns, who, what, where, when, and why is gone. If you heard your name, even if you could hear your name, you can't remember its meaning. So all of that kind of wisdom ceases. You can't comprehend the meaning of things. Then as your wind element dissolves, your breathing stops. Your tongue is dark typically, and blue, dark blue or dark and thick, and there's no longer any taste, ability to taste anything. You can no longer breathe in. First of all, you can no longer feel your body, you can no longer move your body. So that means you can no longer inhale. taste sense completely dissolves, and the vision of a flickering flame appears. According to Song Rinpoche, it's more like the light around a flame, a dim red-blue light. When I've told Geshe about near-death experiences, he hears about that tunnel, the light at the end of the tunnel. He's like, that's like that flickering light. He goes, it could be. So now we know that we're very close to the very final stage, which is called the white vision. So the first 35 of 80, okay, so there's all these different mental factors that have also dissolved. The winds of the right channel and the left channel move into the open head chakra. So we can talk about all that, but it gets a little complicated. What's the main thing to start to know is that the inner signs is after this flickering light, you experience like this white vision, the mind of white experience, of pure like white moonlight in a bright autumn, an almost white sky appears. And that's what they were talking about in the clip that we just mentioned. You hear lots of people talk about that. Then I'm surrounded by this beautiful white light, right? Then as more of the minds dissolve in the right and left channel, there's a red sky. So now you experience like this beautiful red sky like at dawn. And then there's darkness. It's like fainting or like when you fall asleep. And some people think if they haven't practiced with this, it feels like, oh, that's nothingness. But it's not. It's actually like velvet, that kind of like feeling of presence in darkness. So if you're able to maintain awareness, it's going to be something more than nothingness. It's going to be like an empty sky or being in a dark room. And then after that is when the clear light vision appears. And this is the subtlest level of mind, because all these different minds are dissolving. And now is the chance of when your light, your awareness of emptiness can conjoin with this, because now you're actually, and we'll watch this on the next clip of that video, the clear light vision appears. And this is the subtlest level of mind occurring only after the grossest consciousness have ceased. It's like an autumn dawn when the sky is so clear, there's no clouds, no dust. It's not bright like the moon. It's not red. It's not dark. The yogis continue to meditate at this point and can stay as long as they like. As I mentioned, they can stay. There's lots of stories of yogis staying in that state where their body does not decompose for days and days and days. But the point is to try to join our awareness with that moment. If we miss it, then we miss it. But there's an opportunity there at that point to join with that. Okay, any questions about that? Because then I'll walk you through yes, please.
So, sorry, just to clarify, and I think you did say it twice actually. So we will always see this we'll always see this clear white light, the very, very last stage you've just been talking about, but we won't necessarily recognize it. Is that right?
Right, it could be just a flash.
Okay, but it will be there, but we may not have the wisdom to recognize. Right. Okay, thank you.
Especially depending on like our mind state at death. This is what I read a lot about. This is why it's important for us to feel as positive as possible or as confident as possible moving into those states of dying, that we don't move in with hugely fearful mind. It gives us better chance. And so if we've meditated, on emptiness, it will certainly help us at that moment to try to join our understanding. Because if you get to a place where you're meditating on emptiness and it brings you this wonderful feeling, right? And I should say, there's two kinds of meditation. So we can do an analytical meditation where we're really going deep into a subject. But the first meditation is really about focusing and developing that ability of our mind to focus on something. So we use our breath because it's always with us, right? So we train our mind to have that muscle to not go wandering all over here, but to stay focused. And then we take that muscle and put it on, let's say, a topic of impermanence. So we're meditating on impermanence, and when we reach this state of like, oh, then we can just stay in that state a little bit longer because we have that focus. So that's the point, is like we might analyze something until we get that kind of almost body sense of like, oh yeah, I get it. And we can stay with that feeling a little bit longer. So when we're doing that with emptiness, if we're kind of analyzing the lack of self, the lack of inherent existence, and then we have that felt sense of like, oh, we focus on that, if that makes any sense, and sit with it and not stray from it. That's building up that ability to do that with this clear light. Now, I sometimes tell Geshe about all these near-death things that we hear about, because sometimes people are having a really awful, fearful death, but they have an incredibly wonderful near-death experience. So that's hopeful to me. But what he always says is, yeah, but that's not death. That's near death. But still, because as I mentioned earlier, I had these body memories of almost a violent death. So I want to make sure that I could still have a calm mind, even if things were terrible. And I saw this story, this woman, she was getting, a van was just coming, about to crush her. And at the moment that it hit her, she saw this beautiful being step in front of her in the van. And she didn't feel any pain. And she just went off into this blissful state. And she woke up in the hospital like days later. And she wanted to ask everybody about this man. And her children thought she was asking about the driver. And they were like, don't worry, we caught him. He's in jail. She was like, no, the golden man, who saved me. And when I was telling Geshe that story, he goes, yeah, it could be, a holy being that she has some karmic connection with, kind of came in at that moment of death. And that's why she had a more peaceful experience, because she wasn't experiencing somebody trying to run her over. She was experiencing this connection with this holy being, even if she hadn't done all this practice, right? She had in some other life, she had a connection with this being. And so then her experience was just in this other realm. And when Geshe has watched some of these, because I've been really curious about his experience, and he goes, yeah, there's so many other realms and there's so many holy beings. That's where she probably could have been, and they were talking to her and blah, blah, blah. And then she comes back to this life. But it's not the same as death. But it's still, it's closer than what we get when we're just going to the grocery store. So I don't know, that's a long way of answering your question, but this is why meditation helps, is that ability to just kind of stay focused and then also bring in something where our focus can go. So if we do that with, we can meditate on the clear light, we can meditate on the emptiness of a solid fixed self. Just the meditation that we just did on a place, you can do it on an idea. Like, what are your ideas about death? How have those ideas about death changed since you were born? And I can go back and I can look at, like I told you, when I was 4 and I was hearing about death for the first time. And then when I was almost killed, and then when I discovered Buddhism, and then, I can see it just like that river. And so meditating on the river of all kinds of things is only going to help you flow rather than grabbing onto the shore. Yeah. All right. So are we ready to do this meditation now that I've yabbered away long enough? Okay. Get ready. All right. So sit comfortably and let's refresh our intention. Why? Go back to like what you wrote in the beginning of why you're even here today. What you personally are hoping to accomplish, and how accomplishing that will absolutely affect people around you, the people you know and don't know. That it's like all these ripple effects that we should have no doubt about, all these ripple effects that we create. And so trying to make the biggest, most positive ripple is our intention. And that by doing this meditation, we'll make ourselves more familiar with death, so that as we prepare ourselves, by doing as much spiritual practice as possible during our lives, We can be more helpful to others who are dying, helping them overcome their fear, helping ourselves overcome our fear, die more peacefully, and help our whole river of self move all the way to complete enlightenment. So the process of death involves a progressive loss of physical, sensory, and mental functions as nervous activity closes down from the periphery to deep within the nervous system. Imagine yourself dying a natural death and experiencing the following stages as the components of your mind and body gradually absorb. Try to imagine them as vividly as possible with no fear. You have confidence. You feel completely safe. On the first of the 4 stages of the death process, the mind is still on the gross level, which includes our thoughts and sense perceptions. These gradually diminish. Now the first stage, the earth element, absorbs, and a mirror vision appears. So as the earth element is the solidity of our body, your body loses strength, you become thinner and weaker, you feel drained of physical energy. You might feel as if you are falling or sinking, or something is on top of you. It becomes difficult to sit up or to hold anything. Your body color fades and your cheeks are sunken. Your vision becomes dark and blurry. You can no longer open or close your eyes. These are the outer signs of the first stage of the death process. And the inner sign is that mirage appears. So mirage is here and smoke is coming. Now in the second stage, the water element dissolves. So the fluids in your body start to dissolve. Your mouth and nose dry and pucker. Your eyes feel dry. It becomes difficult to move your tongue. You can no longer remember the feeling of pain or pleasure or neutrality. You no longer feel them and you no longer remember them. Your hearing weakens. You can no longer hear external sounds or internal sounds. Your mind may become fuzzy. But because you're familiar with this, you do not become nervous. And now smoke appears. As swirling wisps of smoke or fog. So mirage is gone and smoke is here and fireflies are coming. So in the third stage, the fire element dissolves. The fire element is the heat in our body. So now our mouth and nose have dried up completely and warmth withdraws from our feet and our hands to start with. Your mind alternates between clarity and confusion. You can no longer remember the names of the people in your family or circle of friends. You can no longer remember your relationship to the people around you. Your sense of smell weakens, and your breathing becomes jagged. Short inhale and long exhale. And then the appearance of mirage, of fireflies appears. Sparks, glittering sparks appears. Smoke is gone and fireflies are here, and a flickering candle is next. And now the air element dissolves. You can no longer move your body. You can no longer remember, have thoughts of when and where and how. Your mind may become bewildered, but you've prepared for this. So you know that your awareness of the outside world is dissolving. Things become blurry in your mind. Your thoughts in your mind become blurry. You can no longer inhale. Your sense of taste is gone. Your tongue is thick. You can no longer have any conceptual thoughts now, and the inner vision of a flickering light appears. Now gross consciousness has ceased altogether. And the mind becomes more and more subtle. The flickering flame now turns into pure white vision, a very clear empty sky, like a sky full of the brightness of a full moon. And then this dissolves into the vision of a clear, empty red sky, like a copper red sunset, beautiful and clear. And then there's a vision of total darkness, the kind of darkness when you fall asleep, when you faint. It'd be just a momentary lapse of consciousness, or you may be aware the entire time of the darkness and the empty space and the presence in that darkness. The mind now in the last stage is at its most subtle level, that of the clear light of death. The appearance is like that of the autumn sky at dawn, completely pure and empty, and filled with clear, colorless light. Your mind is focused on this experience for as long as you possibly can, without letting it be distracted by anything. You and this light are the same. This pure, beautiful sensation of clear light sky. There's no separation between you and that. If your mind becomes distracted, you bring it back to the clear light experience. This is the most pure, subtle level of your mind. This is your mind. When the clear light of death ceases, the consciousness passes back through the stages of dissolution in reverse order. The black vision, then the red vision, and so forth. And soon as this process begins, the person is in the intermediate or Bardo state, with a subtle body that can travel instantly to any place it thinks of, pass through walls, as it searches for its next birth. Time in the intermediate state can last from a moment to 7 days, depending on whether or not a suitable birthplace is found. Then at the end of the 7 days, the being undergoes a small death, briefly experiencing the 8 stages of death, and then again experiences the 8 stages in reverse order and takes another Bardo being state. This can happen for the total of 7 rebirths, during which the a place of rebirth is found. So I'm going to just go through the inner signs so that you can remember them. The first one is the mirage vision. The inner sign of a mirage appears. Then the inner vision of smoke appears. Then the inner vision of fireflies appears. Then a flickering flame appears. Then white sky. Then red sky. Then black sky. Like falling asleep. And then the clear light of the most subtle mind appears. So in that way, you can try to fall asleep each night with those inner visions. Falling asleep into the bardo of dreams. Okay, and then take some deep breaths and come back. All right, how was that for everybody? I think it's interesting that we call it falling asleep. You know, we are dissolving into sleep. We do this every night. And it's said that some of the stages are very similar. Obviously, you know, we keep breathing, but some of those stages are very similar, but we don't remember them. We're not aware of them at all. Did that bring up any fear for people? Okay. You know, these stages, I mean, if you have other books, some people write about it a little bit differently in each meditation. Yeah, but it's a really good thing to start practicing. If you have a daily practice, you can put that in there in lots of different places. And make it, you can shorten it. Again, I said His Holiness runs through this several times a day. Throughout the day, he's doing it. So this becomes a normal part of his day. And described almost like 8 notes moving forward, and then he moves backwards through them, the reverse order. And so the easiest one is, you know, to know the inner signs, but to know all the outer signs too will make it less fearful when they're actually happening to you. Now, it's interesting to me because I've watched a couple different people die, and this one woman, she was just starting the first stage, and she would go in and out of consciousness. And when she would come out of consciousness, she would tell us, it's so beautiful, it's so beautiful. So I don't think she had, you know, some of the confusion that's listed in this meditation, I don't think she was experiencing that. She was actually really ready to die, which makes a big difference. I know that Steve Jobs' last words were, "Oh, wow, oh, wow, oh, wow." So, you know, I also think it's important to collect stories and things like this that give us confidence, that reassure us. The biggest reassurance will be our practice. But, you know, it's only natural that we're going to be also wrestling with our fears. So I think that's really important. So when did we come back? Did we come back at 3? How long have we been going now?
We could stop
1
at 2:30 instead of 3. So
Okay. I just wasn't sure what time I even started this. Okay, so why don't we watch a little bit more of that video so you can see them going through the stages that we just meditated on. To me, it's a little intense, this, but tomorrow we're also going to watch one that with Bob Thurman kind of walking us through, and he leads it well. So if we can, if you don't mind, like just clicking on where we left off on that video. Does that sound like a good idea, everybody? Okay, all right.
Because you didn't recognize your real nature, you have wandered here, and your own mind will now arise before you in unfamiliar ways. Now his body and consciousness have separated. Now the dead person does not know whether he is alive or not. Even so, he can see his family and hear them crying. O Tsering Sonam, listen carefully. You are not alone in leaving this world. Everyone dies. Do not indulge any longer in desires and longings for this place. There is no way that you can stay here. Because the dead person was unable to recognize the luminosity of mind itself, his experiences now take shape out of random imagery from his former life. He sees his friends and relatives calling out to him, but they cannot hear his replies. Death has cut him off from them, and sorrow strikes his heart. He sees his family and relatives crying. He can see his bed, but he is no longer the one lying there. Instead, there is a corpse. Tsering Sonam, listen to me carefully. Soon you will experience the intense presence of your own emotional states as peaceful and raging light forms. Do not be afraid. They cannot hurt you. You are dead. Do not cling to the past. Go forward. Tsering Sonam, go forward. You are dead. Do not cling to the past. Pema Chodron teaches that though this world seems stable and solid, nothing here is permanent. But like water, snow, and ice, life is always shifting, changing form. Please tell us more about the bardo. All existence is one kind of bardo or another. It means living in an atmosphere of uncertainty, moving without a place to rest. So that means we are in a bardo now? Yes, we are now passing through the bardo of existence. Here, we want to make something lasting and secure, but no one has ever accomplished this. Our life is always in the hands of death. But death is a different kind of bardo. Yes, when we die, it is completely out of our control. Our experience is completely naked. What is the best path through this bardo? It is a question of waking up right now. Look at your own mind. Look at it when it is calm and still, and when it is running wild. This is what the Buddha did and what he taught.
Okay, why don't we stop it here? Thank you. I think that's a great place to stop that video, because that gets to some of the questions about what we can do right now. You know, we can work with our mind right now, which is also running out of control. And we are in a bardo state right now because, you know, as I mentioned, I get freaked out when I read about the bardo, but we're in a bardo. You know, we're not able to rest solidly. Everything is constantly, we're in that river I had you meditate on. So we can use this bardo experience to help us when we constantly challenge ourselves to see, is this real? Am I dreaming? Am I not dreaming? Is this solid? Is this, you know, how much can I wake up right now? What would I do if this were a dream? Okay, at minimum, I can say a mantra. I can calm myself down. I can do something meritorious. So it's a good thing to practice with. It's an excellent opportunity to use death as our advisor. So I want to tell you about the the 9-part death meditation. And it's very traditional meditation. And then we're going to end with that one today. So if you could bring up my PowerPoint again, please. I will walk you through. One of the things I love about traditional Tibetan Buddhist meditations is they're like an accordion file, you know, like closes up like this. You can just have a couple of files, or you can expand it and jam a lot of stuff in there. So the way that the meditations are like these are always usually written are in these categories and subcategories and these roots, and then these. So there's 3 main roots. They're really easy to they're easy to memorize, and then there's little sub sections under them. Great. So this is the first root. The first root is that death is certain and that no one has escaped death. Our lifespan is decreasing rather than increasing. There's nothing we can do. I mean, we can't expand our lifespan. Even if, you know, we can do things to make sure we live as long as possible, but we can't really do much to add on to the fact that it's decreasing and that there's not much time to practice Dharma in our lifetime. And so the conclusion we draw from that is that I got to practice. All right. And then the second root, if you just click, it should go to the next very cool page, is that the time of death is uncertain, that our lifespan of humans is not fixed, that there's so many causes of death, very few causes of life, but lots of causes of death, and that the body is very fragile. So many weird ways that we can die. And so the conclusion we draw is that, oh, I got to practice now. This is the time. And then the third root is that nothing can help us at the time of death except Dharma. Whatever is your Dharma, like if you are a different religion, you have a different path, that's what can help you at the time of death. It's not that this is the only thing that can help you, but whatever path you're on that ceases suffering is what can help you at the time of death. And so when you're working with other people, you use what helps them. You know, if they're atheist, find what helps them, you know, that they lived a good life. You know, there's a lot of I know His Holiness talks about how much admiration he has for atheist people who have been incredible humanitarians, who that's what they take refuge in at their time of death. So find what that person has as refuge and help them with that. So what doesn't help us is our wealth. I mean, it can help us die more comfortably, but not necessarily, you know. Our friends and family can't help us stop death. They can help us remind us of where I put to our mind if they choose to, if we help them do that, but they can't help us stop death. And your body certainly can't, because it's the thing that's actually collapsing. And so the conclusion then is I must practice purely. So that's a really easy one to memorize. And what I want to do is kind of walk you through a meditation on that. You see my table, I've got like 16 different things here. All right, so get into a good meditative posture. Try to wake yourself up wherever you are. It's either bedtime or close to bedtime. Bedtime or afternoon, late afternoon. And kind of refresh your intention. And now we're going to just do a meditation on these stages, on these 9 parts. Okay, so meditating on the first root, that death is certain. It's inevitable. There's no one who has escaped it. Bring to mind famous people that you know who've died, wealthy people, kings and queens, people who seem to have all kinds of abilities at their fingertips, who are not able to escape death. Nothing can prevent death visiting us. And meditate on the fact that our lifespan is always diminishing in the way that as we drive closer to a town, the distance between us and that town is diminishing. As soon as we're born, the car starts moving. And so the time to practice Dharma is decreasing as well. So this awareness that death is certain, it's inevitable, that our lifespan is decreasing, is like cold water on our face, helping us become determined to practice. And then the second root, that the time of death is uncertain. That the lifespan in our world is not fixed. We don't know exactly when our death will come. There are many factors that contribute to death, but very few that contribute to life. and how extremely fragile the body is. The tiniest little infected thing can get inside of us and kill us. A slip on a stair can set the wheels in motion. It's actually amazing we've lived as long as we have. And then the third root, that the body, that the third root, that the only thing that will help us at the time of death is Dharma. That no matter how much wealth we accumulate, it will not change our death. Our money cannot help us with the death dissolution states. Imagine your friends and relatives who will all want to help you, but they cannot prevent your death. Your body that may want to live can actually not overcome the reality of death. The conclusion we draw is we must practice purely, we must practice now to become familiar with brother death, to become familiar with its stages, its opportunities, its realities. And by becoming familiar with it, it helps us make each act in our life powerful. It helps us cultivate a good life. And cultivating a good life helps us experience a good death and the next step in our journey. So that's what we mean by practice, is joyfully taking advantage of the opportunities around us that are there to help us. And then take a few deep breaths and come back to the group. Okay. How was that? All right. Okay, so feedback. Oh, before we do that, here's a book Advice on Dying by His Holiness. I don't know if you have it, but if you don't and you want more information about the 8 stages, he's going through the Panchen Lama's poem that goes through each of the stages that we have meditated on. It's just jam-packed with really helpful information, very clear descriptions of the death process and each of those stages that we've talked about. I highly recommend it so that you know, because what we're doing in this, weekend is just a little appetizer. And I think that it's a great book to really dive into. So give me some feedback about, about tomorrow, so that we can make this as helpful as possible. I mean, we're starting tomorrow at 12 New Mexico time. Anna, are you going to be able to join us?
Yes, I'll be hosting for you tomorrow.
What time is that for you?
It will be 6 or 7 o'clock. I think it will be 6 because our clocks go back at 12.
Well, that's
So
helpful.
yeah, extra hour in bed.
You'll still be tired, but okay, so that's like 6 to 10 then for you, right? Okay, all right. And we can see, I mean, I think there's like a 45-minute break there for lunch or food or whatever. Is that right, Venerable? It's like, okay. So we can play some of that by ear, see how people are doing. But what else would you all like to make sure we do or get to, or just give me some feedback? Because Zoom is weird. I can't feel you guys. If we were in the same room, I could kind of feel it. And I'd be listening in on your conversations in the break room. You know, I'm just clueless. When I teach live and in person, you know, I have people get into groups a lot and talk over things, and I can get kind of a feeling of how it's going, what people want more of, less of, what they're confused by. I'm also going to give you my email addresses if you'd rather just, you know, chew me out privately. Happy to hear it. But seriously, if you have any like questions, my email address is Steep, that's STEEP, Smith, all one word, steepsmith@gmail.com. So super easy. But also would love to hear anything you want to say here, you know, about what you want, what you don't want.
For me, today has been very helpful. I really like the format, and I'm looking forward to Robert Thurman tomorrow. He tends to be a little bit academic for me in some of the books that I've read, but I will be curious to see how he approaches this subject.
Okay. Yeah, and I know what you mean. This is from his podcast. So, and what I liked about it though, that it has some visuals, and he's walking people through the 8 stages. So I think it will be very digestible. He's not giving a lecture. He's actually like walking people through the stages. So it'll be one more person kind of walking you through the stages. That's what I want you to have as much experience with that as possible. So you find what's the one that kind of suits you so that you all can design that meditation for you. Because as I read these different ones, they're kind of different from what I was taught. You know, they have little different details. They're all this, I mean, basically the same, but everybody kind of adds a little bit of a different thing on there. And what I like about Robert Thurman is he can make things more modern sometimes, like when he's just having not when he's professing, but when he's having just a chill conversation, he can make it like he was talking about, I think it was like, he was talking about all of the death dissolution stages, like collapsing into the bardo, or collapsing into sleep, or falling into these, dissolving into these. We can practice dissolving all day long. And he said, you know, that the black sky can be unconsciousness, but it can also be the force, because it's through that you get to that clear light. And he goes, the clear light, that's what the Jedis are talking about with the force. May the force be with you. So he kind of goes off on these little riffs that are not very traditional, but he's using other analogies that make it understandable to people. So hopefully it's only 30 minutes, so it's not going to take up the whole time. And we can kind of start that early in the day so that we can talk about it and use it the rest of the time. Anybody else? Thank you, Barbara. Anybody else? Michael, what do you think?
I think it's been great so far. The idea that what this should do is help us to say, A, I need to practice. B, I need to practice now.
Yeah.
And get ready for this, but to not necessarily because I'm getting ready for this event when it happens, but so that I'm living the event each day between now and the time it really does happen.
Right. And that we have so many bardo states and deaths and things that we're dissolving away from all the time. We're about to dissolve right now. And that there's just lots of experiences. So, you know, I remember my father was somebody who was very kind of, struggled a lot. I didn't grow up with him. So when I would visit him, I would see how different he was from where I grew up. And he's very hold on to everything, you know, and it was painful to watch. And he kind of like, I think some of his dementia, his old age helped him relax a little bit so that it was, but there were just so many opportunities that he could have practiced letting go. Instead, what he would do is hold on to everything. So he held on to every receipt, every ticket, everything, and organized them all. And in this effort to kind of make things stay in one place. Instead, we can practice the opposite of like, okay, we can't make it stay in place. How can I practice with all of this movement, all of this flow? You know, what can I do to contribute to that flow and help? What can I put in the river rather than trying to make the river stand still? All right, so homework is, especially as you're falling asleep tonight, to if you remembered any of the states, but also like, okay, I'm going to try to remember my dream tonight. I'm going to try to remember my dream tonight. I'm going to walk through the next hours until we see each other again. Anytime I open a door, I'm going to try to stop and go, is this a dream? Is this real? What's going on? Just be as aware as possible. Just challenge it, question it. What is this? Okay. See if you can do that. If you can do that even once, so hurry up and go open a door so you can do it. If you can do it once between now and then, that's huge. And even if you don't, that's okay. You know, I'm going to mark it on my hand right now so that I remember to do that. All right, so let's do the final dedication. And if you can pull up the Shanti Deva's prayer, then thank you so much for helping me with all these screens today. So this is a prayer that we use. It really helps like with our dedication of merit because it's such a powerful prayer. But as before we do it, also think about all the merit that you created today by attending, by sharing your thoughts and questions and concerns and being so open and honest in such a wonderful group. It helps us, and it also helps those around us. It'll help those who watch this videotape, and that this isn't lost. All these actions are like gold in your pocket, and now you have, or seeds, golden seeds, and now you have the decision of where to plant those seeds. And so I would suggest planting them for the highest result. That includes yourself. All beings include you. So we'll read this together. And you probably won't be able to hear everybody because of the way Zoom does it, but saying it out loud really helps yourself to hear your voice, my voice, everybody's voice. All right, may all beings everywhere, plagued by sufferings of body and mind, obtain an ocean of happiness and joy by virtue of my merits. May no living creature suffer, commit evil, or ever fall ill. May no one be afraid or belittled with a mind weighed down by depression. May the blind see forms and the deaf hear sounds. May those whose bodies are worn with toil be restored on finding repose. May the naked find clothing and the hungry find food. May the thirsty find water and delicious drinks. May the poor find wealth, those weak with sorrow find joy. May the forlorn find hope, constant happiness, and prosperity. May there be timely rains and bountiful harvests. May all medicines be effective and wholesome prayers bear fruit. May all who are sick and ill quickly be freed from their ailments. Whatever diseases there are in the world, may they never occur again. May the frightened cease to be afraid and those bound be freed. May the powerless find power, and may people think of benefiting each other. For as long as space remains, for as long as sentient beings remain, until then may I too remain to dispel the miseries of the world. Thank you all so much, and I hope to see you tomorrow. Take good care.
Thank you, Steve. See you tomorrow.